Welcome. I'm Reverend Kate from the Center for Spiritual Living in Carlsbad, California. And today's message is called Working Wonders. So sit back and relax because today is Labor Day and we want to celebrate that with a sense of play. I really have two related topics that I'm going to cover in this talk. The first is what I call the wonder of working, and the second is about working wonders. Now, we live in a culture, really, the world has a culture where people work, where it's normal to work. But here in the United States, we are particularly enthusiastic about working. If you look at studies that say how many hours a week the average American works, we're always right up at the top of the number of hours that people work worldwide. And also, as a nation, we tend to take the least amount of vacation time. Now, why is that? What is it about our culture that has made us so devoted to the idea of work? It's really interesting, but I do think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are primarily a nation of immigrants. And most of the immigrants in the past and immigrants coming today are striving. They're striving to make changes in their lives and really willing to do whatever it takes to make those changes. We're celebrating Labor Day, and it is with the idea of looking at and celebrating the changes in the working conditions from what people had a few hundred years ago to what they have today. Now, in the recent past, there's been quite a lot of talk about the issue of slavery and enslavement. And of course, that is a type of working condition that's really abhorrent. And in addition to those who were enslaved, there were many people who came to America who were indentured. So they might have signed away basically their lives, but their working time for a period of years, sometimes 7 years, in exchange for their employer simply purchasing their passage to America on a ship from Europe. So that would be indentured servitude. Also, a lot of people had to work in all kinds of conditions. Now, my family, of course, were primarily immigrants, and most of them came to the United States and ended up in rural areas, at least to begin with. I have a picture, that I thought was really nice and wanted to share with you for Labor Day, and it's about my relatives, the McKinnons, who settled just south of Carlsbad in Cardiff, which is part of Encinitas. And this is a picture from the 1880s showing them taking a little playtime off their work day, having fun, the women and the children just horsing around. So no matter how hard your work was, there was fun to be had. One of the things that I always thought was particularly interesting about my family, and this shows them on their homestead overlooking the lagoon, was that back then in the 1880s, this was not a very friendly area for agriculture. There wasn't much water. The climate was so dry. And so actually, my great grandfather ended up commuting down to San Diego on the train, staying there for 5 days, working as a train engineer, meaning a person who repaired trains and worked on trains, and then commuting home on the weekends. It's hard to imagine that going from Encinitas to San Diego would be so time consuming that you would have to stay down there for 5 days. But that's what he did. So he was one of our earliest commuters. And of course, a lot of us experience jobs where we're required to commute. And people had to take the jobs that they could get because their livelihood depend on it. And when I say livelihood, I'm talking about their actual ability to eat. You know, not only did men and women work, whether they worked on a farm or whether they worked in the city, but it was customary, unless you were quite wealthy, to have children working. Many children worked. It was customary that starting age 5, children would have to help with chores, or even for urban dwellers, that children would be engaged in factory work. This is a picture of a little girl at the beginning of the 1900s. I think it was taken in 1910, a little girl working in a textile mill where they were spinning thread. And it was common to have children do a job like this because they had little fingers and were able to tie the new threads to the old threads whenever they broke. And so this was the type of job that children might often actually get. Of course, at the same time, there was the beginning of a recognition that workers, people who had to work, had certain rights, and there was a movement to eventually ban child working, and we had the implementation of child labor laws. We had the implementation of shorter work days. We had the implementation of rules and regulations, which sometimes seem overbearing, but I always remind myself that there was a reason, simply that in the old days, workers were not treated well. The work was just simply seen as a trade-off between you give me these hours and I'll give you this money. But sometimes things happen. There were injuries and accidents that happened on the job, which then kept someone from being able to work in the future. And so eventually they came up with the idea of workman's compensation, where there would be like an insurance policy for workers who were injured. These are just some of the things that have been implemented over the years. I wanted to just show you this, the first Labor Day parade. It took place in 1882 in New York City, and it was a celebration of labor and the idea and the recognition that it was the work of people that had created our lives. It's our work that brings food to the table, builds cities, and even allows us to communicate with each other and to have enough wealth to spend time relaxing and enjoying. You know, it's nice to see that we have been able to move on away from such drastic needs that we had to have small children working in factories to a time when adults can choose where they're going to work. And this is a mural by Diego Rivera showing men working in an auto factory. And it's really a celebration and a glorification of the labor that goes into making goods for us to enjoy. And I liked it. I thought it was so nice to see how Rivera brought a sense of dignity and respect to the laborers. So work is good. It has its time and place. It has a wonderful value. I certainly grew up learning to work, being engaged with work, still working today, and I know that's true of most of you. Either you are actively working or you are perhaps retired from working. And you know, there's work where you make things, there's work where you think things, there's work where you study things, there's work which is the time you spend in taking care of your family. There's work that is in service to other people. There are all kinds of work. And what I love to see and what I strive for is for us to progress to the point where each person is able to engage in work that they enjoy. Because when we're doing something that calls to our heart, we're really working for love. And that brings me to the second part of my message today, the working of wonders. Now, in the New Thought teaching, or the science of mind, we teach and understand that there is what we experience as our everyday reality, but there is something greater behind this everyday reality. There is spirit, beautiful, wonderful, every perfect attribute that you can possibly imagine is the truth about spirit. Spirit includes love, life, truth, knowledge, gratitude, beauty, harmony, abundance. It's as if those attributes are natural to it. And I know this is so because all you have to do is look around and see how the natural world is always expressing so abundantly in all ways. Now, we have things about the natural world that we like best. So I like flowers more than rattlesnakes, right? But in each case, it is nature in expansion. Now, because we each are part of this spiritual substance, each of us has within us an inner light, an inner connection to this infinite spirit, which enables us to also engage in the expansion of abundance and good. That's how we can live a more harmonious and a more beneficial life, by getting in touch with our inner spirit. So we have a short kind of, I don't know, I guess it's like a shortcut to thinking about it, which is our saying, which we always say, change your thinking and change your life. And this is actually how we go about the working of wonders. It is a wonderful thing once you realize that you can be in control of what is going on in your life. You can make choices. Now, earlier I showed a few pictures around the turn of the 19th century, so late 1800s, early 1900s, because it was at about this very same time that there was this emergence of what we call the New Thought philosophy. The idea that one didn't have to be enslaved by everyday circumstances as though you were a victim. One didn't have to perpetuate or buy into the belief that you were born to a certain role in life, a certain stature in life, that if you were born to a poor family, you would stay poor, that if you were born to a wealthy family, there was any particular thing that set you above others. No. The idea was that each of us is equal in that each of us is a perfect child of spirit, a perfect child of God. Absolutely perfect. And therefore, no particular person is above any other person. So while I may be an employer sometimes, or a worker sometimes, or while I may be simply doing neither, relaxing, reading a book, sitting in the sunshine, none of those things actually change the truth about me. And the truth is that I am a perfect child of spirit. And it's true for you too, of course. Once you grab a hold of this idea, then you are able to work on your life and work on choosing what you would like to experience in your life. So let's take work. Some people don't think that it's okay to like work. I just spoke to someone. I speak to him often. And it was so funny. He got a new job, minimum wage job. But you see, he got a new job and he started telling me, oh, my job is this, I have to do this, I'm so busy. Those were his words. But his voice, he was so happy to have a job, to be busy, to have people to work with. What was the disconnect there? I heard that he was happy to have this job, but he had a mental picture that, well, it wasn't that great a job and maybe he shouldn't be that happy. After all, the hours were long, the work was hard. In order to accept that all work is good, it just begins with your own mind. Now, I right now am acting as a minister. A lot of people would say, oh, being a minister, that's a nice job. But in the past, I've had many menial jobs. I've enjoyed those too. Why not? Some days were rough, some days were fun. I've had jobs that were very technical. Same thing. It's your attitude about your work that makes it enjoyable or not. There was a book that I read once. I really liked it. It was all about how if you chose what you loved, meaning in your work, the money will follow. Don't just be driven by the need to amass money, but allow your innermost dreams to blossom, and you will naturally discover that you're enjoying prosperity. When you enjoy yourself, you will enjoy prosperity. It's natural because this is an abundant world of good. And what you have to do is make decisions, set them into motion, and accept the wonderful good that can come. Now, in the science of mind, we teach that one of the ways you can set them into motion, and for me, it's the first primary way, is through positive thinking, affirmations. We call it prayer treatment. We're not begging God to give us a favor, because God isn't going to say yes to one person and no to another person. If every person is God's perfect child, then the answer must always be yes. God doesn't play favorites. Your good is perfectly acceptable. Your good is okay for you to have. You deserve it. So just to quickly get back to this idea and how it kind of came forward into our American society, and not only American society, but it's been spreading throughout the world. There were a number of thought leaders, let's call them that, who were working and writing in the 1800s and early 1900s, who brought these ideas out for us. So obviously we have the transcendentalists like Ralph Waldo Emerson, who talked about the law of compensation and the idea of the oversoul. We have Emma Curtis Hopkins, and this is one of her books. Oh, move it over there. High Mysticism, in which she said, speaking about Earth, this is the great planet of achievement. Every individual upon it naturally seeks to accomplish some beautiful and praiseworthy deed. I found a writer called Floyd Wilson, and this is an old book of his called Man Limitless. And he wrote several books about the idea that you could set your mind to allowing a power of good to be in expression through you. He really believed and exemplified the idea that people should be able to think of themselves as being an act of God. That our thoughts were thoughts of God, and our lives were the outpicturing of the life of God, and that we ought to be willing to experience wonderful things, to work wonders in our lives. You know, the person who we always refer to, of course, in the science of mind is Ernest Holmes. He was the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living. And I have just a tiny little book he wrote early on called Creative Mind and Success, because they go hand in hand. What we need to learn and what we can learn is that everything is actually an outpicturing of mind, of universal mind, the creative essence itself, and that everything is governed by the laws of mind, the principles of creation. It didn't just happen one day or 7 days or whatever you want to think about it as the Big Bang. However you think about creation, it's ongoing, and you can tap into it right now through your thoughts and your actions. We create an atmosphere through our thinking, and this atmosphere creates our lives, creates what I call the tendencies of our lives. So positive thinking yields positive living. We can't control everything, but we can control a great deal, and we can always control our reactions to everything. Now, not all of the spiritual teachers of New Thought were living 100 years ago. You know, there's plenty of people who are teaching New Thought and related ideas today. Here's a book by Michael Bernard Beckwith called Spiritual Liberation. And it is about fulfilling your soul's potential. And he has wonderful exercises on visioning. How is it you know what your potential is? How is it you can get in touch with your own inner dreams of how you would like your life to be in expression? There are so many wonderful ways in which you can change your thinking, change your life, and work wonders. So, don't hesitate. Don't wait. Start now. It starts with your very own mind. It starts right here, right now, today. Grab hold of your destiny. Make your labors a labor of love. If you'd like to find out more, you can check out our website or send us an email. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful week. All blessings to you.